RTÉ Drivetime on today's programme.
3 men sentenced for the manslaughter of Sligo pensioner Tom Nyland.
Teachers qualified abroad now to have an easier route to recognition here. We get reaction.
Catherine Connolly well ahead of Heather Humphreys in the polls. The latest on today's presidential campaign.
2 dads, 1 Israeli, 1 Palestinian, join us to talk about the prospect of peace.
A plan to lower speed limits to 30 km per hour in built-up areas. Will it work?
And should daylight saving time be scrapped? Should it indeed? 51551. It's coming down the tracks, no question about it. 51551 for that, or the WhatsApp number is 0870 32 32 32. What I mentioned there, the Department of Education, they're planning a rule change to make it easier for some teachers who trained abroad to be recognised as qualified teachers here. So teachers who qualified abroad but who didn't complete a required period of induction there may now do that induction in a school here. The aim, of course, is to boost teacher supply, but will it work is the question. Give your view to 51551. We'll hear from school principals and the unions in a moment.
Also, Transport Minister Darragh O'Brien, he's been asking local authorities to take a look at introducing 30 km speed limits in built-up areas. We'll have more details on that shortly. But I wonder, what do you think of it? Because I think most people who live in estates or in built-up areas would certainly welcome cars slowing down. But will it work to make cars slow down? Because I know when they introduced the measure in the Phoenix Park a couple of years ago, afterwards it was shown that 97% of drivers just ignored it. And some people would argue, and have argued, that these lower speed limits can cause more road rage and dangerous driving if people get frustrated by slow drivers. But what's the other alternative, do you think? Or is this the way to go? 51551 if you'd like to get in touch on that or anything else that we're discussing on the programme today. And the WhatsApp number, as Cormac said, 0870 32 32 32. Now, first this afternoon to news just breaking in the past half hour. 3 men who brutally attacked and robbed a 75-year-old man who later died from his injuries have been given prison sentences of 14 and 15 years for manslaughter. Tom Nyland from Sligo was put on life support following the attack in January 2022, but he died from his injuries 20 months later. Mr Justice Paul McDermott said it was an unlawful killing of a savage kind of a defenceless man in his own home. He said the robbery had been planned and Mr Nyland had been targeted because he was elderly and living alone. You may remember the case. The 3 men went to Mr Nyland's home between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. at Doon Flynn in Screen in County Sligo on the 18th of January 2022. And CCTV showed that they'd earlier carried out a reconnaissance mission and identified the home of Mr Nyland, who lived alone. Mr Nyland told Gardaí he answered the door to the men who pushed their way into his house and began punching and kicking him while shouting at him and demanding money. They stole money from his pocket and they ransacked his home. Mr Nyland said they continued to punch and kick him as he lay on the ground and he eventually lost consciousness. The judge said Mr Nyland must have been terrified, adding that elderly people living alone were entitled to assume their home is a safe place. John Irving, aged 31 and from Shanwar in Foxford in County Mayo, received a sentence of 16 years, with the final year suspended. Irving had changed his plea to guilty on the 5th day of his trial earlier this year. Francis Harmon, aged 58 of Neffin Court, Killala Road in Ballina in County Mayo, was sentenced to 15 years with the final year suspended, while John Clark, aged 37 of Carrowkelly in Ballina in County Mayo, was sentenced to 15 years in prison with the final year suspended. Both men had pleaded guilty to manslaughter and those sentences will be backdated to when the men first went into custody. We will have reaction to all of this a little later in the programme.
Now, with schools across the country facing ongoing teacher shortages, a new measure has been introduced to help. Teachers who trained abroad but didn't complete their induction overseas will now be allowed to do it here in Ireland, as I said. It's a move that could benefit teachers currently classed as unqualified, despite holding recognised qualifications. Well, joining us now to react is Michael Gillespie, Secretary for the TUI, the Teachers Union of Ireland. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this?
Well, good afternoon, Cormac. Look, anything that improves the recruitment of teachers is to be welcomed. I mean, this brings teachers, gives them more time to get their induction through in Ireland. And while they're being inducted into the profession, they're working in our schools, which helps. However, it ignores the fact that we've got 3,600 teachers in Dubai, some of which don't want to come home because they won't be given, incremental credit, as we said before, for the experience they've gained abroad. So we have fully qualified teachers abroad who we can't bring home because we won't give them incremental credit. We can do it at primary school. They get it at primary school. They don't get it at post-primary.
Okay,
So we're
I promise I'll come to that in just a second, because that's a fair point that's been raised before. Will this measure, though, allowing teachers qualified abroad but who haven't completed induction abroad complete their induction here, will that increase in any way teacher supply into the system here?
Well, it will increase it because there will be people who would want to come here from different jurisdictions because, maybe our system pays a little bit better and maybe people will want to come here for personal reasons. So it more than likely will have a big improvement. It's hard to know how much of an improvement, but like I say, we do have teachers abroad already who are fully qualified and fully registered.
How will they get around, or will there be extra qualifications required? For example, if a teacher is qualified abroad, they may not have the history component of their qualification that they would have here, or Irish, or social science, or whatever the case may be. How do you square that circle?
So what will happen with these teachers is whatever their shortfall in our qualification system compared to wherever they're coming from will be identified by the teaching council, and they'll be given X amount of time, a year, 2 years, to gain that qualification. Now, in that time, they obviously can't get the qualified rate. They'll be getting an unqualified rate of pay, but they will be teaching, possibly in their own subjects, but they will be deemed unqualified. But they will get a time to get that induction. And while they're getting that induction to make up whatever shortfall is identified, they will be teaching in the country.
Okay, and that system is in place previous to this. It's nothing new, is it?
Well, it was in place, but it's been extended now, and it's for a longer period of time. Yeah.
So to come to the point that you're making, and you have been lobbying for Irish qualified teachers working now in Dubai, that is a big bugbear of theirs, isn't it? Even if they do return home, maybe after 5 years working as teachers in Dubai, they feel that they won't be given credit. Well, they won't be given credit for that teaching experience abroad. Isn't that the truth? And that's what you wanted rectified.
That's what we want recognised. And what makes it worse is it's recognised for primary school teachers, but not for post-primary. So that's really a big bugbear of theirs. So, and it's very hard to come back after working for so many years and starting on the bottom of the scale. Now, despite the fact that we now have improved that they're going to get a permanent job, definitely after a year, if they get an initial contract, that's a big improvement than the 2 years was, and we've welcomed that. And the minister announced it last year at our conferences. So that's an improvement, but it still doesn't mean they're going to get full hours, or it doesn't mean they won't get any incremental credit for the fact that they could even be 10 years abroad.
And where is the department on that? I mean, are they looking into it? Is it just a flat no?
Well, it's we're looking into it, yeah.
Okay. And in terms of how much of a difference do you think that would make if that were rectified? You say 3,600 Irish teachers in Dubai alone, but there are others overseas elsewhere.
Yeah, so we know the number that are there, so it could make a difference, especially in the areas where we're short. Science teachers, maths teachers, the modern foreign languages. It's hard to identify how many would come back, but it will absolutely improve things. And what we're getting back is fully qualified and experienced teachers. Not, even if they're experienced in a different system, they've learned a lot. Classroom management skills, all the skills they need to be in front of a class. So they are fully qualified, and before they left, they're fully registered. They will have done their induction here before they could even get a job in Dubai or Australia.
Okay, well, I'd love to know what teachers and principals and everybody in the school system or community thinks of all of this. Michael Gillespie, TUI General Secretary, thank you, and for everyone else, 51551.
Now, Minister for Transport Darragh O'Brien has directed local authorities to review their existing speed limits in built-up and urban areas with a view to lowering speed limits to 30 kilometres per hour in those areas by April 2027. This is all part of the government's road safety strategy, which aims to have fatalities and serious injuries on the roads by the end of this decade. We're joined now by Mary Hannah Hourigan, who's President of the Association of Irish Local Government, and also a Fine Gael councillor on Tipperary County Council. And Mary, thank you for joining us on the programme this evening. So this all puts the focus, and you're very welcome. This all puts the focus on the local authorities to review the speed limits. There will be a consultation on it. Would you like to see the 30 kilometre per hour limits in more areas?
Well, I think there'll be a whole process, to be honest, before that will happen, and it will take some time. In certain areas, obviously, in urban areas, I mean, 30 kilometres would be acceptable. And I'm talking about in my main town here, Tipperary town, on the main street there, 30 is fine. But once you go outside of that, I don't think 30 will be acceptable. So I suppose what is welcome is that it will be up to the local authorities to decide this. And I suppose we have to define what is an urban area. It has to be, obviously, it has to be suitable for the 30 kilometres. You just can't have it everywhere, There'll be a whole process in this.
Exactly. And one person's urban area might be another person's rural Ireland, depending on your point of view and where you're coming from. So that's interesting. You're saying, for example, that in Tipperary town, it's clear to you that Main Street will be an urban area, but maybe not other areas.
Yes,
how
when you
will
go
you
outside
decide?
when you go outside of the outskirts, then as you're driving out of the town, obviously you can't hold up traffic by driving at 30. It just wouldn't make sense, and the environment has to match the speed limit. So I suppose that there will be a lot of work before this will be implemented. But I welcome it. I mean, I think it's a good thing.
And how will you decide? Have you been given guidance from the department as to, what qualifies as a built-up or urban area? Would it be, a certain amount of houses within a certain area, a certain square footage?
Yeah, it hasn't come to our local authority yet, but I know the minister, they have been flagging it since last year, and I know that it is coming. I know that the last time when they were doing the rural ones, it took a lot of time, and there was the engineers, for instance, in our own municipal district, which is Tipperary, Carcashel. There was a month at least spent in replacing or adding the signs. 1,100 signs, the engineer told me they had to. So there'll be a lot of work in it. But I suppose local knowledge is key, and I feel that the councillors will have a say in this, and we will actually be, to go out to public consultation. Nothing will happen without public consultation, and the motorists and the citizens will have to be, their viewpoint will be taken into consideration before any decision is made. But I welcome the minister's vote of trust in us, the local authorities, to make this decision.
Could it make for a very confused system, though, all around the country? Because you could easily have different speed limits, in different towns in the same, very close to each other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I suppose really when we're looking at, I live in the beautiful village of Capawhite in West Tipperary. I look at where our local primary school is, a large school with a lot of children walking there. And I mean, it's on a very narrow road. So I suppose when you look at, housing estates, roads near schools, that has to be taken into consideration. So that's why I think it will take a lot of work. There will be a whole process where I suppose local elected members will be called into a meeting. The engineers will put maps in front of us. They will look at it. They'll discuss it. It'll go out like a planning permission for all the world. It'll go out for public consultation. And I suppose it will take some time to get agreement on all of this. But I think anything we can do to improve road safety and slow people down is to be welcomed, and I'm glad that the minister is doing this.
And I think on that at least people can agree. Anything that will slow people down is to be welcomed. But I know some people, as I mentioned at the beginning of the programme, have concerns that if you lower the speed limit too low, it actually has the opposite effect. It leads to bad driver behaviour because people get frustrated, they pass people out inappropriately. And actually, indeed, we have a text here from a listener, Brian, who says he thinks the 30 kilometre speed limit is crazy. He says it won't work. I recently did on the South Quays to Euston Station in Dublin. Traffic was light. I was holding up others and I was passed out by other drivers. He reckons drivers should drive carefully and appropriate to the conditions. Would you be concerned about that aspect of it?
Yeah, no, I agree completely with what Brian is saying. We need to change the culture. It's all about the mindset of drivers. I mean, it's about 7 years ago now, I was actually coming from a training day that I was at in my own role, and I was coming, I started out my journey in Longford on a Friday evening, and I was coming home, and somebody behind me was trying to overtake me all of the time. And we were going slow coming out of the town, but once he got out onto the main road, he wanted to overtake. And sadly, that driver overtook me, hit the truck in front of me, and there was an oncoming car. He died. I mean, he was rushing home on a Friday evening to his family and didn't make it. And when I actually rang the services to call the guards, obviously there was a fatality in the middle of the road. They came very quickly, and when I was speaking to the guard, they said that the driver behind me had already contacted them because he kept trying to pass me out. So, I mean, it's the culture, it's the mindset, of people that we need to. So anything that will do that it has to be welcomed.
Yeah, and we have another text there from a listener saying that Galway City has the reduced 30 kilometre speed limit. Almost every single motorist, they say, ignores it when they're not stuck bumper to bumper, as is the case most days. But again, as you say, Mary, there's a cultural thing there that also needs to be looked at. What about speed bumps or other traffic calming measures? Do you think they might actually be more effective?
Yeah, and I know 20 million, I gather, has been allocated for this to assist in this process. And maybe we should look at how we spend the money differently. And as I said, it'll take a lot of time. It'll be a huge process. It will come down to individual local authorities, and the public will, as I said, have a say in this. So, I mean, if there's that amount of money allocated to implement new signs, and I told you already 1,100 already in my district last year, then maybe we could spend some of that money, if permitted, on speed. I do think they do make a difference in the village where I'm living. I'd say maybe 8 or 9 years ago, when I worked with our local engineer at the time, they did put in pedestrian crossings and to slow down traffic, and it has certainly worked in the centre of the village where people were coming from 3 different roads flying into the village, and it certainly has slowed everybody down and made it safer. There's no question about that.
All right. Well, before we let you go, Mary, listeners might remember that you were actually very prominent during the presidential nominations as a Fine Gael councillor who went against the party instructions, and you voted to nominate the independent Gareth Sheridan. What do you think now, having watched 3 weeks of campaigning, about how the race has unfolded and the entrance and the polls and everything that we're seeing about how people feel about the race?
Yeah, oh, I suppose, to be honest, that's water under the bridge now. I voted with my conscience at the time, and I do feel today we have two excellent candidates now, and I think, we are where we are, and the main thing is I think that people should come out and vote, and I obviously am supporting, as a member of the Fine Gael party, Heather Humphreys. She's an excellent candidate. She's a great understanding of the North-South relations.
Okay, we're not going to run the campaign here, if you don't mind, because we will be discussing it later. But just on the
I'm on here today to talk, I suppose, about speed limits, but you have asked me the question, so I'll answer it. As the president of the Association of Irish Local Government, we are the representative body for Ireland's 950 city and county councillors. So we fully support the provision of Article 12 of the Constitution, which rightly gives the local authorities a route to nominate the candidates for the highest office in the state. So it's a very important decision. And this reflects the important democratic role of local government and ensures that the councillors, directly elected public representatives, have a vote in the process. So we are mindful, though, that many of our members are affiliated to political parties. So as an association, it wouldn't be our role to interfere with a comment on the internal decisions or the instructions of political parties regarding the nominations. So what I do support is an open and a balanced debate about how councillors can best contribute to ensuring the widest possible, choice. So councillors are closest to the communities they represent, and their role in shaping and supporting the democratic process, including the presidential nominations, is a vital one. And I maybe it'll be looked at before 7 years, before we're out to vote again. I may not be there the next time, but I hope there'll be a different process.
Okay, very interesting, Mary, and thank you so much for joining us. That's Mary Hannah Horgan, who's president of the Association of Irish Local Government. If you'd like to get in touch on anything we discussed there, it's 51551 for your text.
Well, I can tell you one thing, the cat is well and truly among the pigeons in theatre land, because Daniel Day-Lewis has said that theatre is elitist and that the stage was the ultimate goal for his generation of actors. Well, who better to ask then for corroboration or indeed contradiction than the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre General Manager, Stephen Falloon. Stephen, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Cormac.
You elitist dog, you. Is he right, though?
As much as I love and respect the triple Oscar-winning, brilliant, legendary Daniel Day-Lewis, no, he is absolutely, palpably incorrect. What I think is, when he was coming up in the late 70s, early 80s, it was a different time and people weren't as exposed to theatre. That when he was training or when he first presented, people didn't really have the resources to go. But now, we're so much more exposure to theatre. Kids have stage school. I don't know a kid that doesn't go to some form of extracurricular sort of stage school activity. Yeah. So they're much more exposed to theatre now and way more inclined to go, as is everybody.
I wonder, look, let me read the quote for people. The theatre in itself is an elite cultural form, he says. There are, of course, exceptions. Many wonderful theatre companies that manage to put on affordable performances for everyone. But the great thing about the cinema is that everyone could, maybe not so much these days, but everyone could buy a ticket. And does he not cut to the very heart of it? If you're going to the theatre, it could be, for two people, €100 upwards.
Well, look, I mean, certainly in the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre, as well as the Abbey, the Gate, the Getty, the Tree Olympia, our entry prices are all about €20-25. And that is the idea of making it affordable, making sure that theatre is affordable for all. Okay, if you go to Broadway, and Broadway has got a bit of a problem at the moment, and that its costs have gone up very, very high. And theatre there is definitely becoming a little bit more elitist, because I was just looking at, I really wanted to go and see Othello with Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal. And the top price ticket for that was $1,300.
Yeah.
And that in itself is the most elitist. But you don't, thankfully, in Dublin, you don't get that here.
Yeah, although at the same time, right? And I'm not going to defend $1,300 for a ticket, but I mean, it's a very different prospect going to see Jake Gyllenhaal or Denzel Washington in person, acting for you live in person, than it is going to the cinema. I mean, it's a very different prospect. So maybe it's okay that the ticket prices would be more.
Yes, and yes, that's okay. But the unfortunate thing of that is that only those that can afford $1,300 would be able to go to it.
I know. So
therefore,
then, Stephen, is that the problem?
Slightly elitist.
Yeah, but by its nature, it is elitist. But like, you can understand why it would be, because you're not paying to see something that's been recorded and is being played all over the world. You're paying to see that person in person. But because you're doing that, then the price has to be more, and therefore there is an elitism that creeps into it. Despite everyone's best efforts.
Well, I think that's, I can understand what you're saying, but if tickets are affordable, and certainly I think in Dublin there's a great emphasis on affordability to make sure that it doesn't become elitist. Like, we would never charge anything near $1,300.
Well, certainly a lot more reasonable based on what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at Ticketmaster, Fiddler on the Roof, October the 16th, I think, for the Bord Gáis. But I'm not seeing 25, Stephen. I'm seeing...
that's because it's nearly sold out, Cormac.
Come here now. I'm seeing
those tickets
price,
are sold out.
Lowest price, €46. Best seat in the house, €73 and upwards. But I grant what you say. I'm looking at it as well. It is nearly sold out.
It is, and that's a wonderful thing, because it's a wonderful West End production that played in the West End this summer. That's now in Dublin. And in fairness, in the West End, I think the tickets were up to £150, £160.
Yeah.
They're half the price here for exactly the same show with the same cast. We do sort of operate differently. We do keep our prices more affordable. And I'm not just talking about Bord Gáis, but I'm talking about all the other Dublin theatres as well too. So that we're trying not to create an elitist art form, but rather creating art for everybody.
Well, now it's
even
funny.
If you look at opera and ballet, say for example, we have Madame Butterfly coming in a couple of weeks' time. Now, that used to be 100 years ago in Dublin. That was incredibly elitist. You couldn't go to an opera or ballet unless you were wearing black tie.
Of course, you mean opera and ballet.
Opera, exactly.
As opposed to going to the cinema.
parterre.
Because,
Yes.
this is what Daniel Day-Lewis is saying. He said, now, I think he's talking about the UK here in The Guardian. He talked about what he perceived as a continued snobbery concerning the cinema in the UK at an event where he was talking to the London Film Festival. And he says there's an elitism regards theatre and a snobbery regards cinema. You wouldn't be seen dead in a cinema, I'd say, Stephen.
I love all for art, Cormac, all art. I am not a snob in any way.
Well, look, we've got him to deny it, and that's the best tabloid thing we've done in the programme today, Sarah. Stephen Falloon denies being a snob. Look, okay, we'll take it. You're not elitist. Stephen Falloon, General Manager of the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, as you heard in the bulletin, there are 3 men who brutally attacked and robbed a 75-year-old man who later died from his injuries, have been given prison sentences of 14 and 15 years for manslaughter. Tom Nyland from Sligo was put on life support following the attack in January 2022, but died from his injuries 20 months later. The attack shocked the local community and the country at the time. For reaction, I'm joined on the line now by independent councillor on Sligo County Council, Michael Clark, who was also a lifelong friend of the late Tom Nyland. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
I know you're not long out of court. It's an emotional day for you and the relatives of Tom. How are you all?
Well, you know, we're good. Finally, we can put this behind us now and start to miss Tom and to come to terms with his loss to an area that you know, really loved him. He was a man that was larger than life. He was an absolute gentleman. He was integrity to the backbone, and he was a big, strong man that you know, was everybody's friend. And you know, we miss him terribly.
Do you think justice has been done today, Michael?
Well, actually, I think that, you know, that we have to commend the Gardaí for the fantastic investigation they undertook, and it was a very difficult investigation. It was very difficult for the family, you know, to go through all the court sentences. It was very difficult for the neighbours, you know, to give evidence. I'm thinking about the Colpins, you know. And it was a harrowing do altogether. But we got through that, and everybody got through that. And I think to say that we're satisfied with the result is good. And even the family made their comments today to me afterwards, that their thoughts and prayers was with the perpetrators' families that have to deal with this as well today. There has been so many people affected by it, but you know, they're such a good family that they're thinking about everybody and not themselves at this situation.
Really? I mean, I can't get over, Michael, how good-natured that is, to be thinking of the perpetrators' families.
Well, absolutely. You know, like, there's no winners here today. You know, we have got justice, and those families will feel the pain that the Walsh family is feeling today and has felt for the last 2 years. And that's justice. And, you know, there's no bitterness, or there's nothing in the family. They're just happy that they can now put this behind them, and they can move on with their lives and more than Tom in a more natural way.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very difficult situation, but you know, we have to thank Tom also, and I think the judge referred to it, that Tom's own statement that he made from his hospital bed, you know, played a huge part of today's proceedings. You know, Tom told the story in his own words, and you know, as a result of that, an area in the northwest is a little bit more safer than it was 3 years ago. Yeah, and we have to respect that and thank him for that.
Yeah, and it's good you mentioned that. It's an area I know actually very well. I have family in that area, and I know it's full of decent people. Are you saying then that the mourning was the mourning for Tom was suspended until this happened today?
Well, I think the fear, you know, that today wouldn't be got to, and that it would be dealt with in a very final way today. I think that's a line in the sand now, that the community and the family can move on afterwards now and come to terms with this terrible loss to our community. Yeah, I mean, it is a terrible loss, and we feel it as much today as we did 3 years ago when it happened. And also the judge paid tribute to the staff in Sligo General Hospital, you know, that got to know Tom over 20 months while he was there on a ventilator, and got to love him as well. And, you know, so many people is touched by this case all over Ireland and indeed the world. Yeah,
that's true. That is true, because I remember covering it at the time, and we just said in the intro there that the area was shocked, but the whole country was shocked by the killing. I mean, you're a lifelong friend of Tom, Michael, and I just can't help but think he died 20 months after the attack. It was a terrible way to end a life, wasn't it?
Well, Tom was a huge man and had a big heart, and he fought to the bitter end to get better. But unfortunately, his injuries were so severe that he couldn't get by that. And, you know, his cousin Michael was at his bedside daily, and and Michael's wife Marie was there constant with him. And it was a hard ordeal for them to see their great friend and relation in such a condition in bed for so long. But as the judge says, the nurses and the doctors, you know, we have to tip their hat to them today, that made him comfortable and got to know him in Sligo General, you know. Yeah.
So the prison sentences then 14 and 15 years for manslaughter. Can you tell me how the Nyland family, Tom's family, how they reacted today to that?
Well, I think that they listened to the guards that investigated, Detective Michael Kelly and Mandy Gaynor, and they were well prepared for today. And like today's sentence was at the top end, and because the crime was at the top end of manslaughter, and they weren't looking for revenge. They were looking for justice, and I think that they're content that justice has been served today, and that people can move on now, and that that people. And I said earlier that we feel a wee bit safer that these gangs, if they continue to carry out these drug-related attacks on rural Ireland, that the Gardaí will spare no resources to track them down and bring them to justice, as was done today.
Do you think the Northwest, do you think people, especially living alone, Michael, feel safer today after these people have been sent to jail? And how do you think the attack on Tom impacted people isolated, maybe living alone?
Well, I think there was no doubt that there was a time after Tom's death that, people were very concerned about their own safety. And indeed, if you go around rural Ireland now, you'll see all the cameras and the electric gates, where there was where the doors by young days was left open. You could walk in the back door and you could even make tea in a house that might be no in or out the field or something. But now that day is gone. I think that people are very concerned about their safety and security, and they're aware of it. And I think they have taken some steps to do that. And, that's the sad reality of life. I think that the country is awash with drugs, and that has changed society so much. I think that that's the reality of the situation.
Well, the wider society has changed without question, and I hope people feel safer. Would you have a message now, as these attackers of Tom Nyland are on their way to prison to spend 14 or 15 years in prison for manslaughter? What would your message, or the family's message to them, be?
I would say that any young person that is on drugs and that is concerned, that has starved for funds and no money and not able to work because of their habits, they should think hard about it before they break into someone's property and assault someone and rob them to feed their habits.
Yeah, well,
because I think now the Guards has made a statement here today that they will track you down and they will get you.
Well, the drugs element aside completely, let's stick to the conviction that we have in front of us today. Yes. And the conviction, quite simply, is for manslaughter.
Yes.
So it basically, the attack was brutal. There's no question about it, and we had details of it.
Yes.
And that's something that, as you say, impacted rural Ireland, impacted people living alone. And there is no way, in your view now, that the Garda resources won't be spared at all to track people who attack people in their own homes. You will be found is the message, I suppose.
Well, absolutely. And I hope that, the Gardaí, this case resonated with Gardaí. It resonated because, Tom could be anyone's uncle or anyone's father or anyone's relation. And I think it was a Veronica Gearden moment for us in the Northwest.
Yeah.
And I think that the Gardaí did step up to the plate and did, do a fantastic job.
Okay. Can I ask you finally then, how you're going to remember Tom? Because you saw him, your lifelong friends, you saw him at the best of times. You told us how physically big and imposing and gregarious he was. But you saw him at the worst of times as well, at the end of his life when he was fighting to stay alive on the life support machine. How will you overall remember him, Michael, do you think?
Well, today won't define Tom Nyland for me. I think I remember him as the anchor in the tug-of-war team. I remember of that dry, happy smile. I remember of the shy man that wouldn't talk to anybody unless they spoke to him first. And I remember the great company he was and the great sense of humour he had, and everybody's friend, and we miss him terribly.
Well, thanks a million for joining us. Michael Clark, Independent Councillor on Sligo County Council and lifelong friend, as I say, of Tom Nyland, that you all come together in remembrance of Tom this evening. And thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Now, in breaking news this afternoon, Donald Trump says he's speaking to Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a post on his social media platform, the US President said, "The conversation is ongoing, a lengthy one, and I will report the contents, as will President Putin, at its conclusion. All of this comes a day before Ukrainian President Zelensky is due to visit Washington for crunch talks centering on the supply of Tomahawk long-range missiles to Kiev. Well, for the latest in all of this, we're joined now from Kiev by Kira Ruddock, who's a member of the Ukrainian Parliament and leader of the Golos political party. And Kira, you're welcome. Can I ask you firstly about your reaction to this breaking news this afternoon about a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin?
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back on the show. So we here in Ukraine, we just stopped emotionally reacting to those meetings and calls because I want to remind everyone that President Trump has promised to end the war in 24 hours. And then there were different meetings. There was a spat in the Oval Office with meeting with President Zelensky. There was a meeting in Anchorage with Putin. There were many calls and promises. But the truth is, as of right now, here in Ukraine, like nothing changed, nothing happened for us. We have done everything by the book. We have voted for the rare minerals deal that President Trump requested. We have agreed to all his demands. But unfortunately, he was not able to get from Putin anything, even a ceasefire that he was pressuring for. So we are not having our hopes high. However, we hope that President Trump realized that it's not Ukraine that is the problem in this war, and he will finally start putting pressure onto Russia. Over the last 2 months, he has made those deadlines that Russia needs to stop this, otherwise I will implement sanctions, 3 to 4 times, allowing Putin to continue killing Ukrainians. So we just hope that his strategy will change right now. However, we do not have any real confirmation to that.
Okay. Do you think, I know I've seen some speculation in the last short while that he may be buoyed by his success as he sees it in the Middle East in achieving a ceasefire between Gaza and Israel, however tenuous that might be, you know, he's buoyed by that and that he's moving on now to try and do something similar with Ukraine and Russia?
Well, that would be a hope, right? However, we don't know, and I think nobody in the whole world can predict what President Trump can do. However, what we see is he is telling American citizens that he has completed his promises, and ending war in Ukraine was one of his promises. So it will be very, very hard to walk away and say, well, this one I was not able to crack, especially including like all the recent developments in the Middle East, but also with the meeting of authoritarian regimes during the summer and seeing how closely Russia is working with China, Iran, and North Korea. It's a matter of American reputation right now to show American strength.
Okay, and when you say show American strength, then what is it that Ukraine is looking for? I mentioned the President Zelensky is on his way to meet Donald Trump to talk about the supply of Tomahawk missiles. And you will have seen, of course, several warnings today from Russian sources about that supply, potential supply of Tomahawk missiles, with Russia's ambassador to the UK saying that those missiles, which would allow Kiev to hit targets much deeper inside Russia than it can currently reach, that will change the situation on the battlefield.
Well, since the day one of unprovoked full-scale invasion of Russia, they were threatening our partners of not supplying any kind of weapons to us. First, it was about tanks, about long-range missiles, about Patriot missile systems. Every time our partners were trying to make us stronger and give us a chance to survive, Russia was, of course, protesting that because they want us weak and they want us helpless. So I think these statements need to be treated same way as the previous ones. There were so many statements that if Sweden and Finland will join NATO, then they said like something about Third World War. Look, nothing happened after the countries joined NATO.
So you don't believe the threats, because I mean we've Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov saying the delivery of those missiles will be an extremely dangerous move. You former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev saying it could end badly for everyone, most of all Donald Trump himself. You think it's just posturing, that there's not a possibility of escalation if those missiles are provided?
Let me ask you back. how would this escalation look like, given that as of right now, Russia already committed all kinds of the war crimes on Ukraine's territory. They are attacking us almost every day and night. They are launching drones onto the NATO countries, such as Poland and Romania, and other countries where they're unknown drones appearing, but everybody knows where it is coming from.
Yeah,
So, like,
it
how
hasn't been
would the
proven, but
escalation?
I do take the point that most people believe they are coming from Russia, those drones. Yes, go on.
Yeah, of course. So, but like, look, when they are or threatening with the escalation, my biggest question is, okay, so how would you say that there would be an escalation? Because even without these threats, they still keep escalating the war, and they keep bringing the war onto the NATO countries. Perhaps it's not that invasive as it is in Ukraine, but it is already there. So Russia's threats do not have anything to do with the strategy that they are going with. And the strategy is to try out how the NATO defenses look like, to show their partners in China and North Korea and Iran that West is very weak, and to show that there will be no feedback. So instead of looking at Russia's threats, we would encourage our European partners onto some asymmetric actions against Russia, because there was not a good feedback to those recent attacks. And I think European citizens need to know that their leaders can stand strong and provide their security. We are not asking for any military response. However, there should be a symmetric step, maybe canceling visas for some Russian tourists, or maybe confiscating Russian assets finally and using them for the sake of defense of Europe, for the sake of Ukraine.
Okay,
There
so you'd
needs
like
to
to
be
see a
something.
step up in what the EU is doing when it comes to Russia. And what about those plans unveiled by the European Commission today? They've outlined 4 European flagship defence projects that includes a counter-drone system and a plan to fortify the eastern border. This is all part of a drive to get the continent ready to defend itself by 2030. Is that moving fast enough, do you think?
No, it's absolutely. So by 2030, Russia and its allies will be so much farther. There are any plans to take down drones. I will give you an example. In Poland, there were 20 drones that was very hard to take down, and there was such a sophisticated planes used to take down those drones. It's only 20. Almost every night, Ukraine is attacked by 450, 500 drones. So we have to take it down. So we are not already talking things that may happen in 2030. Things are happening right now, and Europe needs to speed up. Because if Ukraine fails, everybody will have to fight. And you see right now that even with all the support, Russia keeps pushing further. And with all the support, Russia keeps threatening the security of European countries.
Can I ask you finally, Kira Ruddick, about these Tomahawk missiles, and if President Zelensky is successful tomorrow in convincing Donald Trump to provide them, why are they so vital? How do you expect them to be used?
So first of all, as a deterrence, and it's very important because we know that Russia only responds to the power, to the strength, and knowing that we have those missiles, perhaps may pressure Putin into finally going onto the ceasefire. However, we are constantly trying to decrease Russia's ability to produce missiles and drones on their territory, and because sanctions obviously are not working properly, and Russia is able to manufacture many missiles and drones. So, and I'm speculating here because I'm not a military advisor, I hope that if we possessing those weapons, we will be able to use them to decrease Russia's ability to hit us every single day.
And just very finally, I'm sure you'd like to express condolences on the tragic death here in Ireland of Ukrainian citizen Vadim Davydenko, who the Ukrainian embassy has issued a statement about all of this today.
Of course, my deepest condolences to Vadim's family and loved ones. Of course, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And we really hope that the authorities will do their best in investigating and finding who is responsible for it.
Kira Ruddick, member of the Ukrainian Parliament, thank you for joining us on the programme this evening.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
You're welcome back. 51551, some of your texts. Giving teachers incremental credit for teaching can result in teachers migrating abroad, knowing that when they get back, they'll get credit, says one listener. And one more in relation to our conversation with the TUI. Best of luck to any teacher on an unqualified rate trying to work in most cities here while paying rent and their cost of living, which is a factor that many people, Sarah, bring up.
Yeah, and lots of people getting in touch to 51551 as well about speed limits and this idea of a 30-kilometre speed limit in built-up zones. One person says, I think drivers will respect the 30-kilometre speed limit if the road design is appropriate for 30 kilometres per hour. A good design is individual to the city, town or village, but plenty of examples already exist around Ireland and the world and should be shared among our communities. That comes from Dave. Lots of people as well, though, raising concerns about the idea of a 30-kilometre speed limit and particularly the impatience that it can cause. Shay in Dublin says, I've driven through the Phoenix Park. I've obeyed the 30-kilometre limit, but I've had cars trying to overtake me, flashing lights, blowing the horn out of pure frustration or impatience. I've no problem with the limit, but I think people's attitudes need to change with regard to road safety. We can keep your texts coming on that or anything else we're discussing today. 51551.
RTÉ Radio 1.
Fine Gael is pondering its next move after a new opinion poll showed its presidential candidate, Heather Humphreys, lagging well behind independent Catherine Connolly. It caps a difficult day for the Humphreys campaign, with People Before Profit TD Paul Murphy initiating defamation proceedings against her and former Minister Ivan Yates wading into proceedings again. Both candidates insist the only poll that matters is election day, with violent swings common in the final days of presidential campaigns. Our reporter Barry Lenihan joins us now with all the latest. Barry, how's this new opinion poll being viewed by both camps?
Well, the Fine Gael camp this week had been saying they felt there was real momentum behind Heather Humphreys, and there perhaps was an expectation that the gap would have narrowed between Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys from their perspective. Remember, the last two polls showed a difference of between 8 and 9 percentage points overall, but this poll in the Irish Times, the Ipsos Behaviour and Attitudes poll, the first poll since the withdrawal of Fianna Fáil's Jim Gavin, to take into account that withdrawal fully, and it actually, rather than the gap shortening between the pair, shows a clear gap, an ocean of a gap, if you will, between Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys, with Connolly on 38% and Humphreys on 20%. But Catherine Connolly insists no votes have been counted yet.
I don't think polls win elections, so I'm going canvassing shortly. Now I have another engagement and then I'm canvassing, and I'll be canvassing every day till next Thursday. People have been engaged from day one. More and more people have signed up to the campaign. More and more people are engaging, and you can see here today and everywhere we've gone. Of all ages, people want to engage. They're interested in the presidency. They're particularly interested in getting the president to reflect their concerns, their values and their vision.
What then of Heather Humphreys? What's she saying?
Well, perhaps some despondency within the grassroots of Fine Gael over this particular poll, and some concerning elements within it as well. In particular, the fact that Fine Gael voters, 56% will vote for Heather Humphreys, but significant leakage to Catherine Connolly, with 22% of Fine Gael voters plumping for the independent Galway West TD. But Heather Humphreys insisted as well that this is only a poll. Polls come and goes, and of course all that matters is election day. But elsewhere for Heather Humphreys today, the People Before Profit TD Paul Murphy, he has begun defamation proceedings against Miss Humphreys. The proceedings lodged yesterday relate to comments made on RTÉ Radio 1's This Week programme over the weekend, and it's arising out of remarks relating to Mr Murphy's role in an anti-water charges protest in Tala in Dublin in November 2014. And Heather Humphreys was asked about this matter on the News at 1 earlier.
Can I just say very clearly, I accept the decision of the courts, but I am disappointed that Catherine Connolly's campaign manager, Paul Murphy, has decided to take legal proceedings against me. And of course, this is the tactic of the hard left and Sinn Féin. When they don't like what you say, that's it, they take to the courts.
Well, to be fair now, people have a right to take defamation proceedings if they feel they've been defamed.
I'm focused on my campaign and not on Paul Murphy, who is Catherine Connolly's campaign manager.
Now, subsequent to that interview with Rachel English, the Catherine Connolly campaign out to clarify, saying that Heather Humphreys claimed that Paul Murphy was Catherine Connolly's campaign manager. It said that Miss Connolly's team has said Mr Murphy is not a member of campaign staff, nor does he hold any management role within the campaign, although he is understood to be a significant supporter of it.
Okay, and then we have former Fine Gael Minister Ivan Yates. He's also been out commenting for the first time since those comments that he made that he would smear Catherine Connolly, smear the bejesus out of her if offering advice to the Humphreys team. What's he been saying? And
those comments coming at a critical moment in the campaign as Heather Humphreys tried to raise serious questions about Catherine Connolly's track record. But Ivan Yates, speaking today for the first time on his podcast, he claimed that the Connolly campaign decided to really amplify his comments in every way that they could. He tried to put clear blue water between himself and his former party, saying he hasn't been a member since 2009. And he also had words to say for his former party. He says the reaction from those on the Fine Gael side who felt this was damaging to Heather Humphreys in terms of reaction and so on, I would say, sorry, hold on a second, let's be clear. Blaming me for Heather Humphreys' difficulties is like blaming Roy Keane for the problems of Man United. And he said he was an analyst, a pundit, a commentator, and the nature of that is pretty graphic and explicit. So there you go.
Okay. What else, Barry, does this latest opinion poll tell us?
Well, those are the questions I teased out with pollster Harry McEvans-Anya, beginning with the Heather Humphreys figure.
It's quite concerning when you look at it from her perspective that now she is the only Conservative, or as some would argue, a centre ground candidate, as her campaign has put it, in the election still, given Jim Gavin's suspension of his campaign. But it looks like she hasn't coalesced the votes from that part of the political spectrum behind her. We have the suspended campaign from Fianna Fáil. We have no Conservative, small party or right-wing independent candidate. And it seems like Humphreys is barely floating above what Fine Gael are polling nationally.
Is it arguable on the trends that her campaign is actually going backwards?
We have seen in the last few polls the number, her support number has declined. This is the lowest figure she's had, I think, in the last 4 polls. So yes, it seems that not only is she not making up ground, she's been losing it. And at this point, when you look at the breakdown of the figures, the amount of people who say they won't vote and they don't know, she's in a very, very difficult position.
What of Catherine Connolly's figure? You say it's her highest at any point in this campaign, but just a small bit higher than from when Sinn Féin officially endorsed her last month.
This is a total number of votes that's roughly equivalent to the total left-wing vote from the peak of Sinn Féin's polling in kind of late 2022, early 2023. When you adjust for undecideds, it's about the same amount. So what we've seen is not only Sinn Féin kind of rallying into her, but she's pulling in now pretty much the entire left-wing vote in this country behind her. And that plan, the strategy of her campaign to unite the left behind the candidate, appears to at this point be paying dividends.
Not only dividends on the left, Harry, but the figures this morning also show how Catherine Connolly is taking Fianna Fáil voters and indeed Fine Gael voters as well.
Particularly when we look at Fianna Fáil, I think it's about a third of Fianna Fáil voters indicated that they would give her their number one preference. It does indicate that Connolly's campaign has been able to expand appeal beyond the left.
Would Heather Humphreys have expected more votes off Fianna Fáil, given the two parties are in coalition together at the moment?
The failure to coalesce those is going to be, I think, a serious question for this campaign. She's certainly had the endorsement of a lot of Fianna Fáil grandees, including obviously the Taoiseach, but that doesn't seem to have moved the needle with the voters a lot.
18 percentage points between Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys, but presidential elections are notorious for swings in the final days. What sort of a swing would Heather Humphreys need to overcome that figure?
We saw Sean Gallagher leading Michael D. Higgins by 15 points in 2011 in the final polls. We're only dealing with 18% of people who are undecided who still intend on voting, and you need a significant break of those in Humphreys' direction for her to have a chance here. So it's a big swing, it's a significant swing. Although what is interesting within that, all the indicators we have point to turnout probably dropping down in this election. Whether or not you see Humphreys supporters kind of say, well, we've already lost, I'm not going to bother. Or conversely, you see Connolly supporters saying, well, we've already won, I'm not going to bother. That's the kind of thing that could have an impact on the day. So both campaigns, it's important for them now to actually make sure that their people show up.
And that was Harry McEvan's Onya, who runs the Irish Election Projections website. What are both candidates likely to do next, Barry?
A critical few days ahead. Polling, of course, Sarah, on Friday week. But what would be the advice for both in this stage of the campaign? Well, that's the question I posed to the head of training at the Communications Clinic, Lorcan 9, who first offered this advice to Catherine Connolly.
18-point lead, and therefore what you are doing is working with your electorate, it's working with your audience, so you keep going. Obviously the core aim is now no mistakes. Slips are fine when you've got an 18-point lead. Underperformance is fine. It's just avoidance of calamity. And the best way of doing that is to stay on the offensive, stay proactive. So rather than going into a defensive position, rather than stop talking, rather than trying to make no mistakes, you actually continue. You probably also look to slightly change it up, stick to the same communication style, stick to the same communication values, but maybe freshen up the message so that it's just hitting the ear a little bit differently. Newer examples coming in, newer ideas for what you might do in the first 6 months within the presidency.
What can Heather Humphreys do from her perspective to retrieve the situation?
You have to analyse that poll. I mean, Connolly at 38%. What has effectively happened there is she talked to her audience. She talked to her audience, which was the people who voted for the left parties last time. So that's basically the same percentage who are now backing Catherine Connolly. That's not a coincidence in my view. So she has that vote. She has that vote locked in. Heather Humphreys on the 20%. She has to just talk to those undecided. So undecideds in the polling today was at 18%. She now needs to get that entire group effectively to turn up for her, to break for her, to bother going to the polls and then decide if they're there to go for Heather Humphreys. That's a tough ask. Part of the objective when you're behind has to be to puncture the enthusiasm for turnout for your opponent, and then you also need that proactive contrasting message. And what I mean by that is a proactive, specific laden message for what she will do in the presidency, and one that will then naturally have a contrast to the people who are not currently voting for Catherine Connolly, so that it's a different image than Catherine Connolly is putting forward, different issues than Catherine Connolly is putting forward, because the only audience that Heather Humphreys now needs to talk to is that undecided 18%. They are people who are not convinced by Catherine Connolly, and therefore you need to give a contrast, but there has to be a proactive message from Heather Humphreys then as well.
How important is Tuesday night's final televised debate?
It's the last thing that could matter, the last time, and maybe for many people, the first time when eyeballs will be truly on the election, will be really looking, when those undecideds are deciding, okay, will I go and vote on Friday? It's incredibly important for both. Look, it's an incredibly commanding lead, so therefore, in retrospect, will any of these debates have mattered?
And that's the final televised debate as outlined there by Lorcan 9. But the next staging post here, Sarah, the next debate, one-on-one, Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys on Morning Ireland here on RTÉ Radio 1 at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Looking forward to it, Barry Lennon. Thank you very much.
Now, plug-in hybrids. When you hear this, plug-in hybrids have long been marketed as the best of both worlds. Everyone said that. The perfect bridge between petrol cars and fully electric vehicles. But new research suggests that promise doesn't hold up on the road. According to a major European study, PHEVs, as they're known, actually emit just 19% less CO2 than petrol and diesel cars, not the 75% less pollution suggested by lab results. Earlier on, I spoke with Sofia Navas-Gulk, who's lead researcher and co-author of the report, to unpack what this means for consumers and car makers. I started off by asking her about these stark new findings.
So we have seen that the gap is even actually widening. So the gap between real world and official values was at 3.5 in 2021 and 2023, already at 5 times. So which is new is that we see the gap widening at quite a striking speed.
Why is that?
So the reason for that lies in how the official emissions are actually being measured, but then also at the same time how the PHEVs are built. So first of all, what is a very striking fact is that you would expect probably PHEVs to have, and they have an electric mode, and you would expect to have them in that mode, 0 tailpipe emissions, but actually they even emit in this mode. So they have emissions in the electric mode of 68 grams CO2 per kilometre.
So they even emit in electric mode?
Exactly. This is like the most striking fact, I would say, that we found. And this is also part of the story why we are underestimating the emissions officially, because from the official side, the electric mode of PHEVs is assumed to be at 8 grams CO2 per kilometre, but actually the real emissions in the electric mode are 8.5 times as high.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that PHEVs are not really designed to be driven in fully zero emission mode, because the electric motor is not powerful enough to sustain driving in this mode so that the combustion engine kicks in.
And is that the main reason why plug-in hybrid electric vehicles emit nearly 5 times the amount of real-world pollution compared to lab tests, or are there other reasons as well?
Yeah, this is just one reason. The other reason is also that there's the so-called, when calculating the official emissions, the official institution has to somehow estimate the share of the total distance that is going to be driven in electric mode. And we have seen now that this assumed share is overly optimistic, so that the official institution or the official laboratory values, they assume a share that is way higher than what is actually the share that's being driven in electric mode.
Okay.
So there's like this twofold story.
Okay, so who does the lab tests that we refer to then?
So this is a standardized test procedure called WLTP. But those values are then taken from the EU as official values. So this is like official laboratory institution that just does this test.
Oh, okay. But is it a regulator? Is it the car industry? Is it part of the EU framework? Or who does it exactly? Do we know?
It's the EU regulation is also there to regulate how this is being tested. So let's say, yeah.
So is it fair to say then that the lab tests are not robust enough at all, or they're even faulty?
They are getting closer. So the problem is being gradually fixed, which is a good thing. So in 2027-28, there will be the final correction of the so-called utility factor, which is what I mentioned with the assumed share of electric driving. Mm-hmm. So this is very important to safeguard this. So then we will have official values that will be better aligned with the real world values. But still, it's important to, even in the future, make sure that it stays aligned with them, because, yeah.
You know, Sophia, some people would have believed that they got the best of both worlds here when they buy a plug-in hybrid. They may feel misled. Would that be fair?
Yes, definitely, because it's not only from the environmental perspective. So even if you diligently charge your car, you still have emissions in electric mode, as we've seen. And then there's not only an extra environmental cost, but also like the expensive. You can, as a consumer, you can see this from the economic side. So PHEV drivers, we found, spend €500 more per year on fuel and electricity than what official values suggest. So even if you look at fossil fuel costs alone, then it's €1,000 higher than what is being claimed. So this is definitely something where consumers are being misled, even in that sense.
Okay. 2 quick questions for you to finish then. Is the argument in favour of, is the environmental argument in favour of plug-in hybrids diminished now?
Yes, definitely. So to buy, if you want to buy something or a vehicle that is good for the clean transition, then you should opt for a fully electric vehicle, because we see that PHEVs are not really the solution. What should the regulators, or what should the consumer, or so you've told us what the consumer should do, but in terms of plug-in hybrids, what should the regulator and governments be doing now? So the most important thing is to focus really on battery electric vehicles. They are the leading technology. So instead of trying to hold back the tide and sticking to fossil technologies, we should focus really on BEVs and incentivize these battery electric vehicles. And then more specifically, looking at the PHEV regulation, it's really important to safeguard the upcoming regulations that are going to better align real-world emissions with official emissions.
Okay, thank you.
Now that is CMAT, and she is one of the stars gathering in Newcastle just around now for the Mercury Prize. A dozen albums are in a tussle for the Coveted Prize of the Best Album of the Year, according to a stellar panel of judges. And our own stellar judge is Ray Cudahy, who's presenter of Late Date Weekends on RTÉ Radio 1. He joins us on the line. Hello, Ray.
Hiya.
So first things first, is it money or status or both?
Well, tonight is the big one. It's the Mercury Music Prize, and it is both really because it is pretty prestigious. And like, initially, it was kind of caught up in that kind of Britpop scene of the early '90s, but it has broadened out since into grime and jazz and electronic and stuff over the years. So it has held a bit of prestige. But hey, listen, there's no doubt about it. The cash prize is £25,000. So you get the trophies and all of that. But I mean, that is a big one for these musicians, no doubt about it.
Oh, it absolutely is. And then CMAT, the Pride of Dunboyne, she's the favourite.
She is the favourite. No, this is significant because, like, the album of the year, it's just judged between British bands and artists and Irish bands and artists. But an Irish artist has never won it in all of its 33 years so far. So CMAT is named as one of the favourites, and that is significant. All right, she's nominated for her third album, Euro Country. She's just back from the States. She was playing on Jimmy Kimmel's show and stuff over there. And yeah, no, while she is the favourite, she probably won't be performing because she's got a wisdom tooth surgery to go. I think she got an infection on wisdom tooth. Like, this is vintage CMAT now, like, Yeah, so I mean, she's like, she's just about to set out on a sold-out UK tour. And then she doesn't quite come crashing down. She was always very rooted to the ground anyway. But her wisdom tooth acted up.
It's not rooted to the ground anymore, yeah. We have another favourite in the tip of the betting, Fontaine's DC. Great year for them.
Absolutely massive year for them. So, and they've been nominated before. Their debut album got nominated back in 2019. And they've just got such a powerful sound. The album is Romance. And like, the thing that I love about Fontaine's DC is that while they are like a huge force in rock music now, they never went for that commercial sound, you know what I mean? They had the first single we heard from the album was Starburster. And like, it was just like, they didn't step back at all from where they were going. The lads just kept the foot planted to the ground. So it's great to see them powering on like that.
Okay, so will you be watching very closely yourself tonight, Ray?
Well, I will, absolutely, yeah. Like I say, like, it is significant. I think CMAT and Fontaine's would be the perfect acts to kind of finally crack it. And of course, so it's on at 9:30. It's being broadcast on BBC4, presented by Lauren Laverne. And it's being the other significant thing about tonight is that it's the first time that the awards are being held outside of London. They're up in Newcastle. And another nominee then is another Newcastle local boy, Sam Fender. And so it's going to be interesting vibes and all eyes on the Irish acts.
All right, Ray Cudahy, thank you very much.
Now, Matt Hayden, agus Andrew Doran Sherlock.
Thanks, Cormac. Well, our current settled spell of weather will continue for a little while longer, but then I'm afraid it's set to turn more unsettled for this weekend. But for the rest of today and tonight, it'll be mostly dry and cloudy with just a few spots of drizzle and mist. Lows of 7 to 11 degrees and light to moderate easterly or variable breezes. Then for tomorrow, it'll stay mainly dry and cloudy with just limited brighter sunny spells. There'll still be the odd patch of drizzle and mist about though. Highs of 12 to 16 degrees and light to moderate east or southeast winds, which will freshen in the southwest and parts of the west later. It'll then be breezy on Saturday with outbreaks of rain gradually extending northeastwards along with fresh and gusty southeasterly winds. Heavier and more persistent rain will move in from the southwest later, so it will be a wet and blustery night with spot flooding possible in places. The rain will clear the north and east on Sunday morning and will be followed by showers or longer spells of rain, but on the upside there will at least be more in the way of sunny spells than there's been of late. And that's the forecast. Thank you and have a great evening.
Now, it is nearly that time of year again. The clocks will go back by an hour on the 26th of October, marking the end of daylight savings. Talks of abolishing clock changes are back on the agenda at the European Parliament, as it will be discussed next week. So, is it time to do it? Well, earlier I spoke to Fianna Fáil MEP for Ireland South, Billy Kelleher, and Fine Gael MEP for Ireland South, Sean Kelly. And I first asked Sean why it is that he wants to get rid of daylight savings.
Well, I have attended many meetings with experts who have done research in universities, etc., and it all points to the fact that daylight savings is, first of all, not wanted by the vast majority of people, and secondly, it's bad for both man and beast. It makes no sense. It was brought in time of World War I to conserve energy. That's no longer an issue. So I think it is time to get rid of it. And as I said, every single research paper has shown that it's actually very bad for people, and even bad for people who don't know it's bad for them. It's obvious in terms of people like who are light sleepers or who might have mental health issues, etc. It upsets them, it upsets kids. And we nearly got it over the line a couple of years ago, but now I'm having to go at it again, so hopefully we can make progress.
And Billy, do you accept that there is tons of research here showing that this is not good for people?
Well, yes, there is research there that sleep patterns are disrupted for a period of time and that it can cause some difficulties and anxiety. But we also have to look at it from the perspective of what happens on the island of Ireland. We have to ensure that if there's any change to this, the UK follows suit. We can't have a situation where we would have potentially on the island of Ireland 2 time zones. And that would be a significant problem for commerce, for trade, for people's just general lives on border regions. And on top of that as well, like we have to be also conscious of the fact that, long evenings are good for people as well. It does get them out. Sporting facilities, not every place has floodlight systems. You can have an extended period of enjoyment and entertainment after work in longer evenings. And if this, the savings time is done away with, that effectively will reduce daylight in evenings by an hour. Now, why it may not have a major effect in June, but in the months of April, May, and August, September, it would very much diminish the evenings to darkness much too early for there to be activity and entertainment after work or after school.
So is that your main concern, Billy? I mean, if we say the UK said they'd come along with this and we wouldn't have 2 different time zones on the island, would you still be against it on the basis of the longer evenings for sports?
Well, I think the longer evenings for sports, not just for sports, but for life in general. I mean, how many people come home from work and enjoy a walk, enjoy cutting the grass, doing a bit of gardening. A lot of those things will be forfeited because you're not going to get up in the morning and do them before you go to work. So, I mean, we have to be just conscious of lifestyle. It would be different if the entire system changed 1 hour earlier where, instead of people going to school at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, that we're all of a sudden going to school at 7:30. But that's not going to happen.
Okay, Sean, what do you think of that second point? We might start with what Billy's talking about there, the longer evenings and the opportunities that gives us in terms of lifestyle.
The evidence doesn't prove that in any way. When we're talking about Indian clock change, you can have a choice between winter time and summertime, as we call it here. So countries could make up their minds which way they wanted to go. And also, I would say as well, if we had no more clock change, would people notice any change from day to day? Do we notice any change from the 30th of June to the 1st of July, the 1st of July to the 2nd of July, and so forth? I think all that is just based on kind of fear of something that might happen, which wouldn't be a reality at all. The vast majority of people in a survey to the European Commission a few years ago, 85% of people said they wanted it ended. And in a recent online poll, 6-1 were in favour of getting rid of clock change. So I think if that's the way people feel, I think they know what they're talking about, and I don't think that's a reality at all.
When you say countries could choose the winter clock or the summer clock, is your expectation that could happen across Europe? So we could have different sort of clocks across Europe? I know we do to an extent anyway, but that some people would choose winter, some people would choose summer.
At the moment, that would be the situation because it has to be discussed. And the last time we got it through Parliament and it went to the Council, that was one of the issues that arose. Some countries wanted wintertime, some countries wanted summertime. But I think that's something you get over again, because if you decided never to change the clocks anymore, you'd be crossing borders every day. We go to Brussels every week. There's an hour difference, and you just get used to it and you don't take any notice of it.
Yeah, and on that point, Billy, I mean, that does happen, doesn't it? Like on landlocked countries, maybe not an island as small as our own, but you cross a border, you change your time zone. We actually did at one point have a different time zone to Britain years ago. It was known as Dublin Mean Time. Could that not be the case once again?
Well, we didn't have as much mobility as well between people between, the island of Ireland and England and Scotland and Wales every day. But I mean, in Northern Ireland, to have a different time zone on the island between, Donegal and Derry, Monaghan and Tyrone, it just, to me, it would be an anathema to that concept of a unitary concept. But Sean, the problem is if we did decide and the UK didn't, well then we would have a difficulty because the Commission will bring forward the proposals, and the UK has already said that they will not necessarily be engaging in this discussion. So that is the issue of concern.
Okay, let Sean. Yeah, go on, Sean. Yeah.
Billy, you said already to be too disruptive for trade and for commerce. I tell you one thing, if you had two time zones in the island of Ireland, or even if the United Kingdom was out of sync with the rest of Europe, it would be an absolute disaster for them to go changing the clock twice a year, from a logistics point of view, from a trade point of view, from a commerce point of view, from a transport point of view. And the United Kingdom and the European Union are getting on much better now. It might have happened maybe when Boris Johnson was there just to show there were differences, but the reality would mean that would not happen. And we aren't that foolish to have two different time zones in the island of Ireland. I think the UK would be consulted, they would see the logic of it, and they would fall into line because it would be in their own interest to so do.
Yeah, Billy.
But the question here is important. I mean, would Ireland go for winter time or summertime? I mean, we don't want a situation where we have darkness in Ireland up until 9:30 of a morning. We have to be conscious. So if you plumb for one or the other, you're going to either shorten the evenings an awful lot on one side, or else you're going to have dark mornings on the other side. And I think at the moment it gives us the flexibility. We've kids waiting in crossroads all over the country. They're in brightness at 8:30 in the morning. But if we went for the winter time, that would certainly be problematic. So I just think we have to think carefully about it. It doesn't make a huge difference technically. Clocks change automatically now with the electronic systems we have and the digital systems. So
Yeah.
I think that we should think long and hard about it.
It does make a difference in people's lives, though, doesn't it? You dread it. Oh, the clocks are changing. It takes you a week to get back to normal. Me, anyway.
It does, Sarah, but I would equally prefer to be out and about walking around in June and July in nice, bright, long evenings rather than have to get up and cut the grass in the morning before I go to work. We have to think of these realities as well.
Sean, how confident would you be of getting it through this time? I think it came up in 2019. It was decided that this should be changed. There was a vote to abolish it, and here we are, 2025, having the same discussion.
I think the Commission would be in favour of it. I spoke to Ursula von der Leyen. I even see that Donald Trump wants to get rid of it in America. I think the Parliament would be in favour of it because the public, 85% they said wants to get rid of it. And hopefully that the Council could look at it as well and work out a solution, because as I said, once you decide not to change the clocks anymore, you just get on with life and you won't even notice it, so it doesn't become an issue. So all those things that Billy are talking about, they'd all be dissipated very shortly, and we'd get on with life and we'd be much happier, I think.
Yeah. Okay, well, interest your listeners have to say on that to 51551. Before I let you go, gentlemen, this actually, as it happens, could have been a presidential debate I'm having with the two of you, Billy Kelleher versus Sean Kelly, on the campaign trail.
Yes. We could be talking about clocks forevermore.
Indeed, how different it would have been. I just wanted to see, just yourself, Sean, what's your feeling from Fine Gael's perspective on how the campaign is going for Heather Humphreys? Do you think you'd have done a better job? Would the campaign have gone better for you?
Well, I was very, very disappointed that the parliamentary party didn't give me a nomination. In fairness to Fianna Fáil, they gave Billy a nomination, they gave Jim Gavin a nomination, they did a secret ballot, and Billy did very well, but Jim Gavin got more votes. If that happened with me, I'd be absolutely delighted. It didn't. But it's water under the bridge now. Yeah.
And if she doesn't get elected, Sean, would you like Fine Gael to look again at how it carries out the process for nominating presidential candidates?
I absolutely would. And I'd have a lot to say about it. And I don't want to go into any great details now. But, it's no secret. I'm very happy, and I was totally taken by surprise. So I think that is something, even whether Heather wins or not, I think that needs to be looked at.
And Billy, what about yourself then, looking at what's happened here for Fianna Fáil? No candidate in the race, but a candidate on the ballot paper. Do you think it could all have been very different if it was yourself?
Well, look, you'd like to think that you'd still be in the campaign. I think what's important is that the party would look deeply at, first and foremost, the process and how it went so badly wrong, but then more importantly to broaden out the electorate to members, to councillors, and a broader base than what happened. But more importantly, I mean, we can't have things where you've secretive candidates coming through, not being open and transparent on this process. And I could understand that for council or Dáil elections where you have an election looming, but we knew this for a long time out. We could have had a process in place. We could have had hustings. We could have had debates across the country. We could have had real passion about the presidency within our own party first, and then that could flow out into the broader public debate during a presidential election. So, look, it was poorly handled. Nobody went in with obviously malicious intent to scupper it, but I think that the leadership, have set up a review group. I hope they not only just assess what went wrong, why it went wrong, but more importantly that there will be recommendations hopefully made in the context of broadening out the electorate.
Okay, well, thank you both very much for joining us this evening. Interesting to speak to you both. That's Billy Kelleher and
Tweet at Drivetime RTÉ.
Now you come back to us just as we have some breaking news. Donald Trump says great progress has been made in a call with Vladimir Putin. He says he'll be meeting the Russian leader quite soon. He posted on Truth Social, President Putin and I will then meet in an agreed upon location, Budapest, Hungary, to see if we can bring this inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine to an end. And let's hope that happens, and let's hope that the war in Ukraine is brought to an end. And that is just the latest line from the US President Donald Trump. Now, as we've been hearing throughout the show this afternoon, 3 men who brutally attacked and robbed a 75-year-old man who later died from his injuries have been given prison sentences of a combined 43 years in prison. Tom Nyland from Sligo was put on life support following the attack in January 2022, but died from his injuries 20 months later. Today, 3 men have been given prison sentences of 14 and 15 years for manslaughter. With the details of what happened in court today, I'm joined on the line by Owen Reynolds, who's court reporter with Ireland International News Agency. Owen, good evening to you.
Good evening.
So
how are you?
Not too bad, thanks. As I say, the 3 men were sentenced to a combined 43 years in prison for this really brutal assault. Can you bring me back to the background, let's say, of this case, to the night this crime occurred?
Yeah, like you said there, it was January 18th, 2022. It was just the end of one of the many COVID lockdowns that we went through during that period. And there was 3 men, the three men who have been convicted and sentenced today were driving around Ballina in Mayo in a distinctive Vauxhall Vivaro van, which they filled up at a local station in Ballina but were unable to pay. And it would appear that prompted them then to do a little reconnaissance mission whereby they checked out Tom Nyland's house and watched his movements for a little while and seemed to have planned to, at that stage, to rob him later on in the evening. Now, we know a lot about what happened because actually Tom Nyland, even though he did eventually succumb to his injuries, he was able to give a statement to Gardaí. And what we know from his statement is that it was just after 6 p.m. He had actually just watched the 6 o'clock news and he was settling in to watch Emmerdale when he heard a knock at the door. When he answered the door, he said immediately upon opening it, 3 men with their faces covered, he could see only their eyes, grabbed him and pushed him backwards inside his own hallway. And they roared and shouted at him, where is the money? We know you have money. Mr. Nyland told them that he didn't have any money, and he said he tried to grab one of them, but he said all 3 of them punched him in the face. They got him to the ground, and he said they kept kicking him and punching him while he was on the ground. And he believed that he fainted for a period of time. But when he woke up, his shoelaces were tied together. But he managed to make his way out onto the street in front of his home on the M59 near Ballina. And it was that then his neighbours then saw him in the street covered in blood with his eyes and his face were so swollen and badly beaten that they actually couldn't recognize him until he began to speak. Mm-hmm. And it was they who alerted the emergency services and Gardaí to the fact that an assault had happened in this circumstances. It would appear that the 3 men also made away with Mr. Nyland's wallet and they ransacked his home before leaving.
It was quite a brutal attack, and as we discussed with Councillor Michael Clark from Sligo, a friend of Tom Nyland's, a lifelong friend, it had a severe shock impact in the area and nationally. And we also know that Tom Nyland's statement from his hospital bed was key. But how were the 3 men caught in the end, Owen?
Well, a lot of the evidence in the case came down to CCTV of the 3 men in that Vauxhall Vivaro van. And it was one thing that Gardaí noticed was that van hanging around Mr. Nyland's house earlier that night or earlier that afternoon, and also very close to the time of the assault. But actually another piece of key evidence was come across fairly fortuitously. A man named John Scott, who gave evidence during Irving's trial. He was a kayaker who happened to be out on Lough Easky 4 days after the assault, and he noticed something in the water. He noticed that it was unusually square, so he went down to pick it up and he realised that it was a wallet. He reported it to a Garda who was a friend of his, and he reported that there was an ID inside the wallet with the name Tom Nyland on it. Now, the kayaker himself didn't realise the importance of that, but obviously the Garda who heard it immediately understood how important it was. So Gardaí went out to that location and they searched around and they found gloves that had been discarded there, and it would appear that the men had been wearing these gloves during the assault, because Mr. Nyland's DNA, blood with Mr. Nyland's DNA was found on the gloves, but also DNA linking the three men to the crime was also found. So the CCTV evidence was crucial, and that DNA evidence that was fortuitously stumbled across in that way really sealed the fate of these men. Their guilty pleas were almost an inevitability when that evidence came out in court.
Okay, court reporter with Ireland International News Agency, Owen Reynolds, thank you very much. Now, if you've ever been out and about in any of our towns and cities and felt the need to spend a penny, well, these days your choices are limited, I'm sure you know. But in Cork, there are plans for a new public toilet to be opened this week on the Marina Promenade. That'll bring to 6, I'm told, the number of public toilets in the city of Cork. But is it enough? And are they in the right places? Corkonians get texting now to 51551. Columnist with the Irish Examiner, Michael Moynihan, has been writing about this in today's issue, and he joins me now. Michael, good evening to you.
How are you?
Not too bad. I'm looking at your piece here. I'm a little bit worried about the new public toilets opening up in Cork, you say. Why, Michael?
I'm obviously glad to be the public toilet correspondent temporarily for the Examiner. Yeah. I think we're a bit generous with the 6 public toilets, in the sense that I think most people would agree that there are maybe 2, and one of them being Fitzgerald's Park, which would be a very generous description of the city centre. Mm-hmm. I think there's been a general dereliction in this going on for several years, and matters are reaching something of a head, because it's being drawn, people's attention are being drawn to it now because there's a new toilet, as you say, down in the Marina. But again, anyone with any familiarity with Cork's geography, again, it's a very generous description to say the Marina is part of Cork City. A lot of your listeners will be familiar with Parky Quay, which is very near to it, which is a good stroll out of the city.
A bit of a stroll, all right. But are you saying there's not enough of them? I mean, who uses public toilets now?
Well, people are very keen to use public toilets. There's a very long tradition of discussing public toilets in Cork. I can tell you. 80 or 90 years ago, we elected a councillor whose slogan was, "They're building arsenals all over Europe. I just want one urinal." It's a very focused messaging there. But on a more serious note, earlier this year, one of the city councillors raised at a meeting the fact that he had bumped into a tourist who unfortunately had soiled himself because he could not find a public toilet, and they were in the second biggest city in the state. There was general embarrassment at another council meeting recently enough, when few of the councillors could actually name where the public toilet in Cork is. It's an unmarked door next to the public library. Oh, really? You can see how this has become quite a topic of discussion.
Well, I absolutely can. All right, yeah. I would have thought though that most people, certainly if I'm in or around Cork, and you happen to need the toilet, you just pop into a pub or a hotel and buy your coffee or whatever the case may be, and use the services.
You can, if they're amenable to that, and they're obviously amenable to you using their service and buying stuff. But I mean, a lot of people will take a chance, go in and ask, can I use the toilet? And they don't actually make any purchases. And plus, I think there's a genuine onus on the municipal authority to provide those conveniences. Pádraig Eisa, TD for the area, actually say that on the record at a council meeting. That's the responsibility of the local authority to make basic public amenities like that available. And I think really, pardon the pun, if the City Council washes its hands of this, well, where does that stop? Do you stop with the upkeep of bridges? Do you not repair roads? You know, where do you draw the line then when it comes to your public responsibilities?
Yeah. We actually looked at this, I think, about a year ago, Michael. There's a similar issue in Dublin in around St. Stephen's Green, and there was a cost-benefit analysis around it. You know, just the cost of running a public toilet was really quite exorbitant. I don't know, have you looked into that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a public meeting, I think it was Newcastle West recently enough, and they were told that putting in a public toilet would cost €85,000 and would be €25,000 per annum in maintenance and cleaning. And you have to acknowledge the realities. You know, there's a security element, there is a very focused maintenance element, but at the same time, you are talking about something that is deterring, in my opinion, the elderly and people with very young children from going into town because they just don't have those facilities.
Yeah, and to be fair now, I think that's quite a bit less than what we were looking at here in Dublin. Is €32,000 a month is what the public toilets in St. Stephen's Green were going to cost. What did you say there? 25,000 a year for maintenance?
Yeah, and in fairness, the charge, I think, roughly for this new toilet down in the marina in Cork is around 30,000 per year. As far as I'm aware, it is per year. Anything more than that, I think, for what is, to be honest, what looks to me like a repurposed shipping container, that it's not actually a new build as such. But, look, obviously, we all know why public toilets are shut down for antisocial behaviour, serious drug taking, vandalism, etc. But I don't think really you can just fold up the tent and wave the white flag and say, look, we can't police this.
Okay.
Because, again, if you don't, where do you end up?
You've got them talking already to 51551. The solution is a government-sponsored toilets in large department stores, is one listener. Another, you're clearly not a woman in her 50s doing her 5k walk in the evenings. If I'm not near the bus station, I'm sunk. And probably wet, says that listener. Look, Michael Moynihan, columnist with the Irish Examiner. Thank you.
My next guests are two fathers, one Palestinian and one Israeli, who both lost their daughters in the Middle East conflict. Israeli activist Rami El-Hanan and Palestinian activist Bassem Aramin, who've both experienced devastating loss, resolved to come together rather than to hate and began striving for peace. They've spent the past week travelling around Ireland on their We Need to Talk tour, arriving in Ireland on the day the current Israel-Gaza ceasefire was announced. And today they're in Westport and they both join us from there. And you're both very welcome to the programme this evening, Rami and Bassam. And thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you
for having us.
I know that last night you were both speaking at the monastery in Kylemore Abbey. You were joined by a number of people that I think our listeners would be familiar with. Irish author Colm McCann, violinist and composer Colm McInerney, and singer Maeve Ní Bhfuil Catha. It's a unique event, really, by all accounts, and it's been sold out for a long time.
Oh yeah, it was a unique event. All the events since we got here a week ago were unbelievably warm and heartwarming, and the Irish people has their heart in the right place. They support our cause, and it was a wonderful meetings.
So can you tell me then, I might start with Rami yourself first. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Where do you live? And tell me a little bit about your family.
I live in Jerusalem. I'm a seventh generation Jerusalemite. I'm a Jew. I'm an Israeli, and before anything else, I'm a human being. And 28 years ago, I lost my 14-year-old daughter, Smadar, in a suicide bombing in Jerusalem.
That was in 1997. It was a Palestinian suicide bombing. What age was your daughter?
Yeah, she was 14 years old.
And I imagine you can still remember very well the day that you got that news.
Yes, something she will never forget. This is with you 24 hours a day, 60 seconds out of every minute. The pain does not go away. This is one word you never hear.
It's something you will never forget, I'm sure. It's something, though, Bassam, if I may speak with you for a moment, that it's an experience you share.
Thank you for having us. In fact, I joined the Parents Circle Families Forum, which is Israeli and Palestinian families who lost their beloved one after the killing of my 10-year-old daughter, Abir, in the 16th of January 2007 by an Israeli border police who shot and killed her from a distance of 15 to 20 meters in her head from the back. 2 days later, she passed away in Hadassah Hospital, where she born, and where Smadar, Ram's daughter, born and died. We don't know each other. In that time, 10 years between Abir and Smadar, but it's the same killer, the same criminal who took off the lives of our daughters. It's the Israeli occupation as a source of violence. If there is no occupation, we don't need to kill each other. and we don't need to fight each other. So I joined the parent circle 2 days after I lost Abir, because I know Rami 2 years before I lost my daughter.
Can you remember, can I ask you this, can you remember talking with Rami when you realised after you had lost your daughter in those circumstances? Can you remember?
Yes, in fact, Rami was the first person with his wife who arrived to the hospital back in the 16th of January 2007. He stayed with me with other Israelis for 3 days or 2 days after when Abir passed away. He was the first one to arrive, and we are very close friends before. So he know my family, he know Abir, and always he said that I feel that I lose my daughter again for the second time.
And Rami, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to know Bassam and how you became such close friends?
Yeah, I met Bassam for the first time on 2005 by the cradle of the inauguration of a new movement of Israeli ex-soldiers and Palestinian ex-prisoners, which is called Combatants for Peace. My older son, Elik, was a soldier in the Israeli Special Forces, became refusnik, and he was one of these few Israelis and few Palestinians who created this organization of people who have decided to stop participating in the violence and work together for peace.
And how did you and your son, Rami, get to that point? Because I think an awful lot of people would understand if you had gone in the opposite direction after losing your daughter in a Palestinian suicide bombing. How did you decide to move towards wanting peace and reconciliation from there?
The automatic response is naturally anger, which eats you from within. The automatic response when someone hits you in the face is to hit back. But then we are human beings. We are not animals. We can use our heads. You start asking yourself questions. Will killing anyone? Will bring her back? Will causing pain to anyone? Will ease this unbearable pain? And the answer is certainly not. So you start to ask yourself questions. What can cause someone to be that angry and mad and hopeless that he's willing to kill and blow himself up with 14 years old little girl? And it's a process of a journey towards the other side that was deliberately and viciously hidden from me all my life. I'm a victim of the Israeli upbringing educational method. And the decisive moment was when I joined the Parent Circle, and I first met Palestinians for the first time in my life when I was 47 years old.
My goodness. Rami, can I jump in and ask you something about what you said there, that the natural reaction, and I think everybody can understand this, would be to slap back or to hate.
Yeah.
But you and Bassam have not done that. You've reached out and tried to understand and feel compassion for the other side in the hope of peace. My question is this: why do you think more people engaged in this conflict don't do the same?
Because this is the natural way to act, because most of the people built in this way that they are incapable to stop for a moment and think of the consequences of this cycle of violence. You kill one of mine, I will kill two of you. What will happen next? What will happen next is October 7th. What will happen next is many October 7th, and retaliation and revenge and so on. The only way out is to reach out and talk to each other, understand the problem and solve it.
I think, Bassam, then, if this peace process, if we can call it this, that's at the very early stages right now, do you think it can work? Do you think it can last?
I hope, we pray that it will continue what happened, the ceasefire, to stop the genocide, the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and genocide in Gaza. It's amazing. This is what we pray for, to see the deal of the hostages and the Palestinian hostages from the other side, or prisoners. It's amazing. But this is the first step. It's a very small step, but it's very important to start. Until now, I didn't see the the Palestinians involved, really. No one mentioned the Palestinian state. No one mentioned to end the Israeli occupation. And this is the source of everything. This is the first step to end the Israeli occupation. Otherwise, unfortunately, they just try to manage the conflict another 5 years, another 10 years. And this is what we believe. We believe to deal with the source, with the roots of the conflict by ending the Israeli occupation, recognize the Palestinian state, which we call every state that didn't recognize Palestine, to follow Ireland, for example, which was the first state to recognize Palestine as a very important step towards a real peace process.
I wonder, though, Bassam, for those of us watching from afar, what has happened in Gaza for the last 2 years and how many families have been shattered and how many children and adults have been maimed for life and lost family members. Is it? I know you have been speaking before this. You've been speaking about a time before October 7th. How big is the mountain to climb now to get people to the place where you are and where Rami is, where you can actually start to believe peace is possible and to believe peace is possible in your heart?
You know, in my heart, I believe in it. I can see it. And it's not written anywhere that we're going to continue killing each other forever. And always I remember my faith that the Palestinians didn't kill 6 million Israelis, and the Israelis didn't kill 6 million Palestinians. And there is a German ambassador in Tel Aviv, and there is an Israeli ambassador in Berlin. So we can do it. The only way to stop talking about revenge and investing in more revenge is to achieve justice. Those blood need to be rewarded. It means to have a real justice, to stop the occupation, to recognize the genocide that Israel committed, and everyone to take responsibility about their actions. This is the only way. Otherwise, imagine if you are a kid in Gaza, you grow up in this during these 2 years. They just think how to revenge. And we always remember that the Hamas people who made the attack in the 7th of October, they were 10 to 12 years old back in 2014 when Israel invaded Gaza again and again. So they just invest in more hatred now until we make justice. This is how conflicts end between two sides. And we are not in a conflict. It's an occupation against another people. If Israel have the right to defend itself, they have no right to occupy another people's land.
Yeah. And can I ask you, Rami, the same question really, because obviously there is so much hurt in Israel from October 7th and trauma in Israel from October 7th. How do you think the people of Israel are going to be able to get past everything that has happened since?
You said it's a mountain. It's not a mountain. It's a very, very deep hole, and we are at the bottom of it. And we reached peaks of hatred and anger and humiliation and revenge, which inevitably will lead us to more anger, more hatred. The vast majority of Israelis, I'm afraid to say, and I'm sorry to say, do not see what is happening in Gaza as a genocide. And they are completely unaware of the consequences that will happen. We have a pile of little bodies. It will take generations until we will be able to live with what we did in Gaza. What Bassam and myself are offering is a way out of this hole. This is the only way. We climb every morning out of this deep hole, and we decide every morning again and again, I will choose this way and not the other way, because the other way leads to nowhere.
Well, Rami and Bassam, our listeners are listening very attentively to you. One says, my goodness, I saw these men in Limerick and drove to Connemara to queue for a ticket and see them again. These men are Nobel Peace Prize winners. Incredible unity. One other says, thank you so much for having these two wonderful gentlemen on your show. I read a paragon some years ago and had often wondered how they and their families were doing. And if they were even still living, they are both exceptional. I really thank you both for joining us on the programme. And we know on our island that out of conversation, sometimes between two men, a lasting peace can come. And I hope that happens in your homes as well. Rami,
Indeed, the Irish people is a living example that it is possible.
Well, let's hope
if we could do it, we can do it.
Let's hope it's true.
Exactly.
Thank you both. Rami Elhanan and Bassam Aramin. Thank you.
And that is all from us for today. The programme was produced by Alistair McConnell. Research was by Fiona Donlan. Broadcast coordinator was Stephen Higgins. And Kieran Dunn was on sound. Up next is Arena. From all of us here in Drive Time, have a great evening.
Drive Time on RTÉ Radio 1 with Sarah McInerney and Cormac Ó.